The Vrexian Empire had spent approximately 4,000 years perfecting the art of making other species wet themselves in terror. This was not hyperbole. Their military scientists had literally measured moisture levels in enemy trousers during combat scenarios. They had charts. They had peer-reviewed studies. They had an entire department dedicated to what they called pre-combat psychological liquefaction. The galaxy, in its infinite wisdom and finite patience, had learned to respect this dedication to fear-mongering. When Vrexian warships appeared in your star system, the appropriate response was not to fight back. The appropriate response was to update your will, kiss your spawn goodbye, and hope that whatever deity you believed in had a decent returns policy on prayer. The Vrexian approach to warfare was elegant in its simplicity. Why waste ammunition when you could make your enemies collapse into quivering puddles before the first shot was fired? Their weapon of choice was not plasma cannons or antimatter torpedoes, though they had plenty of those. No, their masterpiece was the Siren. The Siren was not a sound. Calling it a sound was like calling a black hole a bit of a strong breeze. The Siren was a psychoacoustic nightmare wrapped in subspace frequencies and dipped in existential dread. It bypassed the ears entirely and went straight for the primitive brainstem, the part that still remembered what it was like to be a small squishy thing hiding from predators in the cosmic dark. When the Siren activated, species across the galaxy responded with remarkable consistency. The Threndel would freeze mid-stride, their 6 legs locking up like rusted machinery. The Foxian warriors, famous for their battle rage, would drop their weapons and search for their mothers. The Keltorian hive mind would fracture into millions of individual thoughts, all of them screaming. Even the silicon-based architects, who did not technically have nervous systems, would somehow find a way to experience pants-soiling terror. The Vrexians had tested the Siren on 47 different species. It had a 100% success rate. They were very proud of this statistic. They mentioned it at parties. So when the Vrexian 7th Terror Fleet dropped out of hyperspace above the human supply route designated Echo 9, Commander Rax was not worried. He was, in fact, already composing the after-action report in his head. Estimated enemy casualties, all of them. Estimated time to complete surrender, 4 minutes. Estimated pants-soiling incidents. Yes, the human convoy was pathetically small. 3 cargo transports, 2 escort fighters, and what appeared to be a civilian vehicle that had gotten lost and decided to tag along. The lead transport was hauling medical supplies to a colony world. The second had prefabricated housing units. The third was carrying something the manifest listed as emergency rations and morale supplies, which Rax assumed was military code for alcohol. The civilian vehicle was a genuine mystery. It was shaped like a box on wheels, painted in colors that hurt Raxian optical sensors, and appeared to be held together by optimism and adhesive tape. According to the scanner data, it was emitting a faint energy signature and playing music. Loud music. Bad music. Music that suggested the driver had lost a bet with the universe. Rax positioned his fleet in standard terror formation theta. 6 battle cruisers in a hexagonal pattern, each one bristling with enough firepower to sterilize a small moon. The Siren emitters on each ship began to glow with that particular shade of light that did not exist in normal space-time. This was going to be easy. Rax gave the order. The Siren activated. The sound that was not a sound rippled across space-time like a stone thrown into a pond made of nightmares. It was the scream of dying stars. It was the whisper of entropy. It was the sound your ancestors heard in the dark when they huddled around fires and knew, absolutely knew, that something was watching them from beyond the light. The human convoy's escort fighters immediately veered off course. Good. The cargo transports started broadcasting distress signals. Expected. Rax leaned forward in his command throne, mandibles clicking in satisfaction. Then he noticed something odd. The box-shaped civilian vehicle had not stopped. It had not even slowed down. It was still moving along its previous trajectory at exactly the same speed, the terrible music still blasting from its communications array. Rax frowned. Perhaps the humans in that vehicle had died instantly from fear. That sometimes happened with species that had particularly weak cardiovascular systems. But no, The scanner showed life signs. In fact, the life sign appeared to be moving. The driver's side door of the vehicle opened. A human emerged. It was wearing what appeared to be casual civilian clothing, completely inappropriate for space travel, let alone a war zone. The human stretched, joints popping audibly enough for the fleet's sensors to pick up the sound. It looked around at the Vrexian battlecruisers with the sort of vague interest one might show toward unusual cloud formations. Then the human cupped its hands around its mouth and shouted. The fleet's translation matrix, which had been calibrated to handle 73 languages including several that existed only in mathematical theorems, struggled for a moment before producing a result. Hey, is that just the ice cream truck? Because I'm not really in the mood for a cone right now. Silence. Not the terrified silence that usually followed the siren. Not the shocked silence of species confronting their own mortality. Just regular silence. The awkward kind you get at parties when someone makes a joke that nobody understands. Rax stared at his display screen. His second-in-command stared at his display screen. The weapons officer stared at her display screen. Somewhere in the depths of the ship, the Siren technician stared at his equipment readouts and wondered if he had forgotten to carry the one in some critical calculation. The human was still waiting for an answer, one hand shading its eyes as it looked up at the battle cruisers. Hello, the human called out. Look, if you're selling something, I'm really not interested. I'm just trying to get to Outpost 17 before the cafeteria closes. They make these sandwiches on Thursdays, and if I miss them I have to wait another week. Rax realized his mandibles were hanging open. He closed them with an audible click. Sir, his second-in-command said carefully. The Siren is operating at full capacity. All diagnostics show green. The psychoacoustic waveform is propagating correctly through local spacetime. I can see that, Rax snapped. The human appears to be unaffected. I can also see that. The human was now leaning against its vehicle, arms crossed, tapping one foot with visible impatience. The gesture was universal across species. It meant, you are wasting my time, and I have places to be. This was not in the manual. This was not in any manual. Rax had read every manual the Vrexian military had produced over 4,000 years of psychological warfare, and none of them had a chapter titled, What to Do When the Enemy Mistakes Your Ultimate Terror Weapon for a Frozen Dessert Vendor. He opened a communication channel to the human vessel. This is Commander Rax of the Vrexian 7th Terror Fleet. You are in violation of Vrexian space. Surrender immediately or face annihilation. There was a pause, then the human's voice came back over the channel sounding confused and slightly annoyed. Vrexian, buddy, my nav system says this is neutral space. Did you guys move the border again? Because the last time you did that I ended up 3 hours late to a delivery. And my supervisor was not happy. Rax felt something he had not experienced in his entire military career. It was not fear. Vrexians did not do fear. It was not anger, though that was getting close. It was something more insidious. It was doubt. The creeping uncomfortable sensation that perhaps the universe was playing a joke. And he was the punchline. This is not a border dispute, Rax said, keeping his voice level through sheer force of will. This is an act of war. You will surrender your vessels, or we will destroy them. The human sighed. The sound came through the communication channel with perfect clarity, and it carried the weight of someone who had dealt with this exact type of nonsense before, and found it tedious. All right, look, I'm going to be straight with you. I've been driving for 16 hours, my back hurt. I've listened to the same playlist 47 times because someone, and I'm not naming names, forgot to download new music before we left port. And now you're telling me I need to fill out surrender paperwork. On a Thursday, the human pushed off from the vehicle and walked a few steps closer to the battle cruisers, squinting up at them. Also, what is that noise? Is that coming from your ship? Because it sounds like someone's trying to parallel park a freight hauler inside a cathedral while ghosts scream about their student loans. Rax looked at his second-in-command. His second-in-command looked at the weapons officer. The weapons officer looked at the Siren technician, who had appeared on the command deck looking pale and confused. The Siren is functioning perfectly, sir, the technician said, his voice cracking slightly. The frequency modulation is precise. The subspace harmonic resonance is within acceptable parameters. By all metrics, this human should be experiencing catastrophic psychological breakdown. And yet, Rax said slowly, he thinks it is an ice cream truck. I don't understand what an ice cream truck is. Neither do I, and that is precisely the problem. Down by the convoy, the human had been joined by another human. This one emerged from one of the cargo transports, also stretching, also looking deeply unbothered by the presence of 6 battle cruisers, and the psychoacoustic embodiment of cosmic horror. Hey, the second human called out to the first. What's with the noise? The first human shrugged. I think it's an ice cream truck, or maybe one of those music festivals where everyone pretends to have a good time while standing in mud. Huh. The second human tilted its head, listening. You know what it reminds me of? Remember that summer we stayed near the amusement park, the roller coaster that kept breaking down and playing that recorded safety message on loop? Oh man, yeah, I had nightmares about that message for weeks. Right? Not because it was scary, just because it was annoying. They both nodded in agreement. Then they noticed the Vrexian battle cruisers seemed to be waiting for something. Are we supposed to do something? The second human asked. I think they want us to surrender. What? Like right now? I haven't even had breakfast. Same. Although, honestly, I'm more worried about those sandwiches at Outpost 17. We're cutting it close. Rax felt his grip tighten on his command throne. Activate secondary psychological protocols. Full spectrum fear induction. Deploy the visual nightmare projector. The space around the battle cruisers shimmered. Holographic projections materialized, each one carefully designed by Vrexian military psychologists. To trigger primal terror, there were shadowy figures with too many limbs. There were impossible geometries that hurt to look at. There were eyes. So many eyes, watching from angles that should not exist. The humans looked at the projections with mild interest. Is this part of the ice cream truck thing? The first human asked. Maybe it's a promotion, like buy one cone, get a free existential crisis. That seems like a weird marketing strategy. Yeah, but you know how competitive frozen dessert vendors can be. The second human walked closer to one of the holographic nightmares, which was currently depicting the heat death of the universe, while whispering subliminal messages about mortality. The human waved a hand through it. It's a hologram, pretty good quality actually. The rendering on those shadow effects is impressive. Neat. Think they take requests? I'd love to see them do something from that one movie. You know, with the thing. Which thing? The thing with the other thing. Oh right, that was a good movie. Rax stood up from his command throne. His legs felt unstable. 4,000 years of military tradition. 4,000 years of perfected terror tactics. 4,000 years of making the galaxy tremble at the mention of the Vrexian name. And these humans were critiquing his holographic projectors, like they were attending some kind of technical demonstration. Sir, the weapons officer said quietly, perhaps we should simply open fire. No, Rax said. If we open fire without proper psychological submission, we'll look like amateurs, like the Grathian war host, who just shoot things without any sense of style. With respect, sir, we already look like amateurs. Rax did not have a good counter-argument for that. Down by the convoy, a third human had emerged from the box-shaped vehicle. This one was carrying what appeared to be a beverage container, and a food item wrapped in reflective material. What's going on? The third human asked, taking a bite of the food item. Alien battle cruisers. The first human explained. They want us to surrender, I think. Also, they might be selling ice cream. Are they any good? Haven't tried their ice cream yet. The hologram game is solid though. The third human nodded, chewing thoughtfully. Do they accept credit chips? Or is it a cash-only situation? Didn't ask. Rax opened the communication channel again. Humans, you do not seem to understand the severity of your situation. We are the Vrexian 7th Terror Fleet. We have conquered 47 star systems. We have broken the will of countless species. Our very name causes civilizations to evacuate their bowels in fear. There was a pause. Then the first human's voice came back. Okay, first of all, that last part was super gross, and probably says more about your dietary habits than your military prowess.
Second, if you're not selling ice cream, what exactly are you doing here? We are here to make you experience fear beyond comprehension. How's that going for you? Rax did not answer, mostly because the honest answer was poorly, and admitting that seemed like a bad career move. The third human finished the food item and crumpled the wrapping. Look, I'm going to level with you. That sound you're playing, it's kind of annoying. Not scary, just annoying. Like someone's car alarm going off at 3 in the morning. Could you maybe turn it down? Some of us are trying to maintain our sanity during a long haul. The siren is not meant to be turned down, Rax said, his voice hollow. The siren is meant to shatter your sanity. Yeah, well, it's shattering my concentration. I was in the middle of a really good audiobook.
The news spread through the galactic communication networks, with the speed and inevitability of a particularly aggressive rumor. By the time Rax had withdrawn his fleet in what the official report would generously call a tactical reassessment of engagement parameters, half the known galaxy had already heard about the incident. The Threndel Collective was the first to pick up the story. Their news networks ran with the headline "Vrexian Terror Fleet Mistakes Human Delivery Route for Customer Service Opportunity." The accompanying article was 3 paragraphs of facts followed by 17 paragraphs of barely concealed schadenfreude. The Foxian Broadcasting Union went with humans immune to fear, concerned about sandwich availability. Their military analysts spent 6 hours on live television, trying to explain how this was possible, failed completely, and eventually just started arguing about sandwich construction techniques. The Keltorian hive mind did not use traditional news services, but the collective consciousness developed what could only be described as a galaxy-wide internal joke about ice cream trucks. Approximately 40 Keltorians simultaneously thought the punchline, and the psychic resonance was detectable on deep space sensors 3 sectors away. Even the architects, who communicated through mathematical proofs rather than language, managed to express the concept of amused bewilderment through a particularly elegant equation that proved the Vrexian reputation was inversely proportional to human caffeine consumption. The Galactic Assembly called an emergency session. This was unprecedented. The last emergency session had been called when the Vrexian Empire had sterilized the Pollux homeworld. Before that, it was when the dimensional rifts near the Andara cluster started leaking things that should not exist into normal space. The ice cream truck incident, apparently rated somewhere between cosmic horror and genocide on the scale of galactic import. Ambassador Yenix of the Threndel Collective stood at the central podium, all 6 legs planted firmly, mandibles clicking with diplomatic precision. We are here to discuss the recent encounter between Vrexian military forces and human civilian personnel. The incident raises several questions about the continued effectiveness of Vrexian psychological warfare tactics. Questions? Someone muttered from the Foxian delegation. That's a diplomatic way of saying the Vrexians got humiliated by a guy in a delivery truck. Yenix ignored this. The Vrexian Empire has built its military doctrine around fear-based subjugation. If humans are immune to these tactics, it fundamentally alters the balance of power in multiple sectors. The Vrexian delegation sat in stony silence. Ambassador Threx, who had the unenviable job of explaining this disaster to the assembly, looked like he was contemplating the benefits of ritual suicide. His species did not practice ritual suicide, but he was considering starting a new tradition. The humans were clearly anomalous, Threx said, his voice tight. Further study is required before we draw conclusions about the entire species. Oh, we've done further study, said Ambassador Fennec of the Foxian Union, standing up with the kind of enthusiasm that suggested he had been waiting for this moment. We pulled all available data on human psychology, cultural practices, and military encounter. Would you like to know what we found? Threx looked like he would rather eat his own appendages, but he nodded. Fennec activated a holographic display. Humans have a documented history of responding to existential threats with what they call humor. When faced with planetary extinction, they made jokes. During their Third World War, they painted smiling faces on their weapons. They have an entire cultural concept called gallows humor, which involves laughing at death itself. The display shifted to show human soldiers from various conflicts. In every image, despite the apparent danger, at least one human was smiling or making some kind of absurd gesture. Furthermore, Fennec continued, clearly enjoying himself, Humans have spent their entire evolutionary history being terrified of everything. Predators, disease, each other, the dark, heights, confined spaces, open spaces, deep water, spiders, public speaking, their own mortality. They have anxiety about having anxiety. They developed an entire medical field just to deal with being afraid. Your point? Threx asked. My point is that humans have been scared of so many things for so long, that they've basically exhausted their capacity for new fear. You can't terrify someone who spent their childhood afraid of monsters under the bed, their adolescence afraid of social rejection, and their adulthood afraid of bills they cannot pay. They've already experienced every flavor of terror their neurology can produce. Your siren is just another item on a very, very long list. The assembly chamber buzzed with conversation. The Keltorian delegation rippled with collective thought. The architect representative recalculated several probability matrices. Yenix called for order. The question remains, what do we do about this information? We could test it, suggested Ambassador Wren of the Deltheran Protectorate. Send controlled fear stimuli to human populations. Measure their responses. Develop a comprehensive psychological profile. Absolutely not, said a new voice. The assembly turned. Ambassador Hunt of the Human Federation had stood up. He was tall, like most humans, and carried himself with the casual confidence of someone who had survived rush-hour traffic on Earth, and thus feared nothing the galaxy could throw at him. Ambassador Hunt, Yenix said. The floor recognizes the Human Federation. Hunt smiled. It was not a comforting expression. Let me be very clear about something. Humans are not immune to fear. We feel fear just fine. We're afraid of plenty of things. But here's the thing about humans and fear. We get annoyed with. He walked to the center of the chamber, hands in his pockets, the very picture of ease. You know what the siren sounds like to us. It sounds like every annoying noise we've learned to tune out. Car alarms, construction equipment, neighbors who play loud music at 2 in the morning, crying babies on long flights, customer service hold music. We have spent our entire civilization developing the ability to ignore unpleasant sounds while we go about our business. That cannot be the entire explanation, Threx protested. You're right, it's not. Hunt's smile widened. The other part is that your siren triggered something in the driver's brain. A memory. A very specific memory associated with a particular kind of sound. And that memory said, annoying vendor vehicle possibly selling overpriced frozen treats. Ice cream trucks, Fennec said, nodding. We found references. Mobile food vendors on Earth that play repetitive music to announce their presence. Exactly. And here's the beautiful part, Hunt said. The driver's brain made a connection. Annoying sound equals ice cream truck. Ice cream truck equals minor annoyance, not major threat. So instead of feeling fear, he felt irritation, maybe a little curiosity about whether he wanted ice cream, but definitely not terror. The assembly sat in stunned silence. But the holographic nightmares, Threx said weakly. The impossible geometry, the eyes watching from angles that should not exist. Hunt shrugged. We have an entire entertainment industry built around that stuff. Humans pay money to experience fear in controlled environments. Horror movies, haunted houses, roller coasters. We invented recreational terror. Your nightmares are our weekend plans. This is absurd, Threx said. This is humanity, Hunt corrected. We're not fearless. We're just really, really tired. And when you're tired enough, even cosmic horror becomes just another thing to deal with before lunch. The Galactic Assembly dissolved into chaos. Representatives shouted questions. Delegations argued among themselves. The Keltorian hive mind briefly fragmented into 2 factions, debating whether this was hilarious or terrifying, then decided it was both. Yenix attempted to restore order, failed, and eventually just let everyone argue it out. In the Vrexian delegation section, Threx sat down heavily. Next to him, a military advisor leaned over. Sir, what do we do now? Threx was quiet for a long moment. We adapt. We always adapt. Adapt how? I have no idea. But we cannot rely on fear tactics anymore. Not against humans. They have somehow managed to weaponize their own exhaustion,
and cultural baggage. The advisor nodded slowly. Should we consider alternative approaches? We should consider everything. Diplomatic overtures, trade negotiations, cultural exchange programs. Anything that does not involve making sounds that remind them of frozen dessert vendors. Across the galaxy, in a small office on a human military station, General Abrams watched the assembly broadcast with growing amusement. Next to him, his intelligence officer was trying very hard not to laugh. "Sir," the officer said, "should we tell them?" "Tell them what?" "That we've been analyzing Vrexian psychological warfare tactics for months. That we've been training troops to recognize and resist the Siren. That the whole ice cream truck thing was just a lucky coincidence." Abrams smiled. "No. Let them think we're immune through sheer exhaustion and cultural weirdness. It's better for us if they underestimate human psychology. They're going to change their entire military doctrine." "Good. Let them scramble. Let them waste resources trying to figure out how to scare us. Meanwhile, we'll focus on actual military preparedness." The officer grinned. "That's kind of devious, sir. That's kind of human." 6 months after what the galaxy now universally called the ice cream incident, the political landscape had shifted in ways nobody could have predicted. Well, almost nobody. A few human strategic analysts had predicted exactly this outcome, written reports about it, and then watched with satisfaction as their projections came true. They did not mention this to anyone. It seemed impolite. The Vrexian Empire, faced with the sudden and uncomfortable realization that their entire military philosophy was based on a tactic that failed against humans, did what any reasonable civilization would do when confronted with obsolescence. They panicked quietly and expensively. The Vrexian Ministry of War commissioned 47 different studies on human psychology. They hired xenopsychologists, cultural anthropologists, and even a few human consultants, who charged outrageous fees and mostly just shrugged a lot. The studies came back with conclusions that ranged from humans are weird to humans are really weird, to have you considered that humans might just be incompatible with our entire framework of understanding. The Empire spent billions of credits trying to develop new fear-based weapons that might work on humans. The Whisper, which was supposed to induce paranoia through subspace murmuring. The Shade, which projected personalized nightmares directly into the visual cortex. The Dread, which manipulated gravitational fields to create a physical sensation of falling forever. Humans responded to the Whisper by saying it sounded like their boss calling them into a meeting. They responded to the Shade by comparing it unfavorably to their streaming service horror selections. They responded to the Dread by asking if this was what vertigo felt like, because if so they had medications for it. After the 9th failed weapon test, the Vrexian Ministry of War quietly shelved the entire psychological warfare division and started investing in conventional weapons. It was humiliating, but it was better than continuing to waste resources on fear tactics that apparently only worked on species with normal survival instincts. The rest of the galaxy watched this transformation with a mixture of amusement and concern. The Vrexian Empire had been the dominant military power for 4,000 years. Seeing them reduced to ordinary warships and standard tactics was like watching a master artist forced to paint with crayons. But what really changed the galactic power structure was not the Vrexian decline, it was the human ascent. Prior to the ice cream incident, humans had been regarded as a minor species. Industrious, certainly. Technologically competent, yes. But ultimately just another mid-tier civilization, trying to find its place in a crowded galaxy. They controlled a handful of systems, maintained a modest fleet, and generally kept to themselves except when they were hauling cargo or providing technical services. After the incident, everything changed. The Thrindle Collective approached human diplomats with a proposal for a mutual defense pact. The logic was simple. If humans were immune to Vrexian psychological warfare, having them as allies suddenly became very attractive. The humans agreed, negotiated favorable trade terms, and quietly began establishing military bases in Thrindle space. The Foxian Union followed suit, then the Deltharan Protectorate, then the Keltorian hive mind. though their proposal involved a lot of psychic imagery that the human diplomats had trouble interpreting. Something about shared consciousness and sandwich construction techniques. The humans agreed anyway, because it seemed rude not to. Within 6 months, the Human Federation had gone from controlling 7 star systems to having defensive agreements with 43 different species across 12 sectors. They had not conquered anyone. They had not fired a shot in anger. They had simply become the galaxy's most desirable allies, through the power of being weirdly unbothered by things that terrified everyone else. Human military contractors found themselves in high demand. Species wanted to know how to train their soldiers to resist psychological warfare. The humans, displaying the entrepreneurial spirit that had gotten them into space in the first place, started offering courses. The courses were not what anyone expected. "All right," said Instructor Davis, addressing a class of 30 Thrindle soldiers, who stood at rigid attention. "Today we're going to learn about annoyance tolerance. This is a critical skill for resisting fear-based attacks. Can anyone tell me what annoyance tolerance is?" Silence. The Thrindle soldiers looked at each other with their compound eyes, mandibles clicking uncertainly. Davis sighed. "Annoyance tolerance is your ability to experience something unpleasant without losing your mind. Humans are very good at this, because we experience unpleasant things constantly. Traffic jams, automated phone systems, people who chew loudly, slow internet connection. We have spent our entire existence being annoyed, and we have learned to function through it." One Thrindle soldier raised a foreclaw. "How does this help us resist the Siren? Because the Siren is just another annoying. It's a really annoying thing, but conceptually it's the same as sitting in traffic, or listening to hold music. Once you reframe it in your mind as an annoyance rather than a threat, it loses its power." The soldiers looked skeptical. Davis understood. This was not traditional military training, but it worked. The humans had tested it extensively on volunteers from various species. The success rate was not perfect, but it was high enough to be useful. "We're going to practice," Davis continued. "I'm going to play increasingly annoying sounds, and you're going to go about normal activities without reacting. We'll start with something simple. This is a recording of what humans call a car alarm. The sound play." The Thrindle soldiers immediately stiffened, their bodies going into threat response mode. "Too much reaction," Davis said, stopping the sound. "Let's try again. This time, I want you to think about something boring. Paperwork, inventory reports, tax filing, whatever your species considers tedious bureaucracy." They tried again. It went better. Not great, but better. Across the galaxy, similar training programs were producing similar results. Not every species could adapt. The architects, being silicon-based and non-biological, found the whole concept baffling. The Keltorians could not separate individual thoughts from the hive mind long enough to practice annoyance tolerance. But enough species showed improvement that human training methods became the new standard. The Vrexian Empire watched all of this with growing frustration. They had gone from galactic terror to galactic joke in less than a year. Their enemies no longer feared them. Their rivals no longer respected them. Even their allies had started making subtle inquiries about switching to human defensive pacts. Ambassador Threx, who had somehow kept his position despite being the face of the Empire's greatest humiliation, found himself in an uncomfortable meeting with the Vrexian High Command. "We need a new strategy," said General Voss, her scales flickering with agitation. "The humans have destroyed 4,000 years of military tradition with one stupid comment about frozen desserts." "It was not the comment," Threx said carefully. "It was what the comment revealed. Humans process fear differently. They have cultural contexts we do not understand. They have survival mechanisms that make them resistant to our methods. So we abandon psychological warfare entirely. No, we adapt it. We study human culture more carefully. We find what they actually fear. Not existential dread, not cosmic horror, but personal fears, social rejection, failure, disappointing people they care about. These are the things that keep humans awake at night." General Voss considered this. You want us to threaten them with bad performance review. I want us to recognize that fear is not universal. What terrifies one species might bore another. We built our entire military around a single assumption, that all sentient beings fear the same primal darkness. The humans proved that assumption wrong. So what do we do? Threx was quiet for a moment. We do what we should have done from the beginning. We learn about our enemies before we try to break them. We gather intelligence. We understand their psychology. We tailor our approaches. That sounds like actual work. Yes, it does. The meeting ended without any concrete decisions, which Threx counted as a victory. At least nobody had suggested they should just start shooting humans and hope for the best. Meanwhile, on Outpost 17, the human driver who had started this entire galactic incident was finishing his ship. He had delivered his cargo, picked up new assignments, and was now enjoying one of those sandwiches he had mentioned. They were in fact quite good. His communicator buzzed. A message from his supervisor. Hey, you're apparently famous now. The brass wants you to come to headquarters for some kind of ceremony. Something about diplomatic service. They're giving you a medal. The driver read the message, chewed his sandwich, and typed back a response. Can it wait until after lunch? These sandwiches are only available on Thursday. There was a pause. Then the supervisor replied. That's exactly the kind of thing that made you famous in the first place. Sure, it can wait. Enjoy your sandwich. The driver smiled, took another bite, and looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, entire civilizations were restructuring their military doctrines, because he had been confused and slightly annoyed at the wrong moment. Somewhere out there, the balance of galactic power was shifting, because of ice cream trucks and sandwich availability. It was absurd. It was ridiculous. It was, the driver reflected, very human. He finished his sandwich, crumpled the wrapper, and tossed it in the recycling unit. Then he pulled up his assignment list for next week. Another convoy run. Another long haul through neutral space. Another opportunity to listen to the same playlist on repeat, while hauling cargo from one end of nowhere to the other end of slightly different nowhere. It was not glamorous work. It was not exciting work, but it was his work. And he was good at it. And apparently being good at boring work could sometimes change the galaxy. He started the pre-flight checklist for his vehicle, the same box-shaped truck that had confused an entire battle fleet. It still played terrible music. It still looked like it was held together by optimism and adhesive tape. It still had that one panel that rattled at high speeds. But now it was also the most famous civilian vehicle in 12 sectors. People recognized it. Other drivers gave him respectful nods at refueling stations. Someone had even written a folk song about it, though the lyrics were mostly just confused questions about ice cream truck economics. The driver did not let the fame go to his head. Fame was just another thing to deal with, like traffic or paperwork or that weird noise the engine made sometimes. He had work to do, sandwiches to eat, and playlists to not update. The galaxy could sort itself out. He had deliveries to make, and somewhere in the depths of space, the Vrexian 7th Terror Fleet was being retrofitted with conventional weapons, and a new mission statement that carefully avoided mentioning psychological warfare. Commander Rax, who had been demoted but not discharged because the Empire needed experienced commanders, even if they had been humiliated by delivery drivers, stood on his bridge and looked at the new equipment. It was solid, practical, boring, just like the humans, he thought. Boring right up until the moment they made you question everything you thought you knew about warfare. Rax activated his command console and reviewed his new orders. Standard patrol route, standard engagement protocols, standard everything. He missed the Siren. In a way, it had been elegant, efficient, terrifying to everyone except, apparently, the one species that actually mattered. But orders were orders. The Empire was adapt. 4,000 years of tradition could not be overturned in a day, but it could be modified, updated, and reluctantly dragged into a new era where fear was not the ultimate weapon. Rax gave the order to depart. The fleet moved out, conventional and competent, and utterly lacking in psychological warfare capabilities. It was probably for the best, he thought. The universe had a way of humbling the proud. The Vrexians had been proud for a very long time. Maybe it was time they learned to be practical instead. Besides, he had checked the intelligence reports. Humans were expanding their trade routes. More convoys. More deliveries. More chances for Vrexian forces to encounter box-shaped vehicles playing terrible music. Better to avoid the whole situation entirely. Better to patrol different sectors. Better to pretend that the ice cream incident had never happened, and definitely did not represent a fundamental shift in how the galaxy understood fear, warfare, and the peculiar nature of human psychology. The fleet jumped to hyperspace. The stars streaked past. Somewhere in the distance, a human convoy was making its scheduled delivery run, completely unaware that they had broken an empire and rebuilt the galactic order through sheer confusion and sandwich-related priority. It was the most human victory in the history of warfare. Nobody had intended it. Nobody had planned it. Nobody had even realized it was happening, until it was already done. And that, more than anything else, was what made the Vrexians uncomfortable. They could plan for enemies who wanted to conquer them. They could prepare for rivals who wanted to destroy them. But they had no defense against allies who did not realize they were winning. The galaxy spun on. The humans kept delivering cargo. The ice cream trucks kept playing their annoying music. And the Vrexian Empire learned, slowly and painfully, that sometimes the most terrifying thing in the universe is not darkness or death, or cosmic horror. Sometimes the most terrifying thing is realizing that your ultimate weapon sounds like a minor inconvenience to someone who just wants to finish their shift and eat a decent sandwich.